Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast with Scot and Dan. Hi. I'm Scott, and with me as always, the pot pie to my pill and the cookies and cream to my Amy's got quite a scream. It's Dan. How you doing this evening, Dan?
I actually do like cookies and cream ice cream, so I'm doing well.
So, we actually had to take a week off from the Legion podcast. I think we said why in our previous podcast. I think we did. Didn't we? Did we? I don't remember. Because we actually, for the first time in roughly, what's it been, 4.5 years, something like that, we actually occupied the same space in the same state in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was a fun weekend, I would say.
Yeah. You look like you're having a good time once you were willing to have a good time.
I'm not sure what that means. Well, there was a lot of alcohol involved, so that tends to help, especially if I'm and I think other than the initial restaurant that we all met in, or most of us met in, beyond that, it was making my own drinks, and I do like a heavy pour in, especially, yeah. At one point, because we were hanging out with a bunch of people who, as many who listen to us know, they get together. And it started off being, these are all people who were all listeners of the Jay and Jack podcasts, just the way we were. And so we're hanging out, and one of the folks we're hanging out there that I was really happy to meet, and you had met before, last year, I believe, was Brian, who's also actually one of our more ardent listeners. And so it's late, I think. Can't remember if it was Friday or Saturday. I'm gonna say Saturday. Yeah, I think it was Saturday. And I was going back. We were downstairs, and he wanted me to. I was going up to get another drink, of course. And he said, "Oh, can you freshen up mine?" And so I freshened up his. Did a little mixing job with it, like mine. So I don't know if he reacted at that moment or he commented on it later. Because when I think I made a comment about the heavy pour, he's like, "Yeah, when I had my drink, it's like, oh, he makes them really strong." It was like, it's already bought and paid for, so make it as strong as you want, Although at one point, Saturday, late Saturday evening. So it's really late, and several of us are sitting on this patio deck-like area at this at Jay and Colleen's house, the people who we were hanging out with. And I don't know how many of us there are. There might be 10, 12 of us sitting out there, and I'm sitting there, and I don't know how much I've drank at that point. That's one thing. Like when you're in a bar, you tend to kind of keep track, especially if you're concerned either about if you're drinking too much or money or whatever. When you're just hanging out at a house for X number of hours, you kind of lose count, or you're not really keeping track, other than how low the liquid level is getting in a bottle, maybe. And I mean, I was feeling it, but I didn't feel that bad. And then I had like this slight sporadic, imperceptible to most other people, hiccup thing happening, except when the hiccup would happen, it felt like something more was about to come up other than air. And the problem with that is once you start thinking you're sick, that's why you often will get sick. And all I kept thinking is like, oh, I don't want to get sick at Jay and Colleen's house. I don't want to be that guy. I'm already that guy for enough other things. I don't want to be that guy for that. But then alternately I was thinking, oh, wait a minute, if I'm in Dan's car, the motion of the car might do the number on me. And next thing you know, I'm splashing the windshield with, whatever it was I ate earlier or something, which wasn't much probably. But I did try to do something about it while I was there, and it turned out I was kind of fine. I didn't really need, I didn't need to, I wasn't, it was one of the, I mean, when I got back to the hotel room, I was like, oh, I'm feeling okay now. It was just like a momentary. It was probably more mental than anything. I mean, hell, most people would have just went to the room and like, thrown up and passed out or something. I just had to go back downstairs and wait for you to show up with the next shipment of people you were bringing because I left my sunglasses in your car, which, so there's my priorities.
Yeah.
But,
No, it worked out well that you thought you were sick, because I mean it was, you were in the first load of people I hauled back to the hotel, and I didn't get to bed till after 4, so it was probably good that we got the ball rolling, at some point then.
oh yeah.
I'm not a night owl like you.
Yeah, me
Those
going.
are those are probably like the three nights I've been up the latest in the last, other than random Raleighs being up late in many many years.
Right. And for me, that was just your average Friday and Saturday nights, right when I was going to sleep, except in a strange bed with pillows that were way too soft for my liking. But but yeah, it was a fun time, especially. I mean, obviously for me, other than you, I hadn't met any of these people in person, and a few of them actually do listen to our podcast, either some or all of our podcasts, like Brian, of course. Got to meet David Gott for the first time. Our Dennis, who I think he's actually listened to a few of our podcasts too. That might be it. I don't know if anyone else does, but as well as people who
And Matt.
and Matt, yeah, well, Matt's actually appeared on our podcast. As have I guess technically Jay, Jack, and Colleen have all shown up on our podcast at one time. So yeah, but it was cool. I enjoyed it pretty much, and my main concern was about my cat, and he did exactly what I thought he was going to do, but my neighbor handled it fine. So my house smelled clean and fresh when I got home. I was very pleased about that, and yeah, it was a good time. And depending where my life is and how money is, I will see if it's possible for me to go again next year. We shall see, but I'd like to. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And hopefully things will work out and you can come down again.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
It was fun. Okay. But this podcast is not supposed to be necessarily about, talking about our sojourn to Raleigh or whatever. We are here. We are actually going to be doing double duty for I like my alliteration, the mesmerizing mindfuck that we engage in every week. Because due to that meetup, we had to skip a week for Legion. So we're going to cover not one, but 2 episodes this week. So, with that said, we probably shouldn't waste any more time. And let's start off getting right down to chapter 13 of Legion. Well, we actually lucked out with chapter 13 and the one that we're going to speak afterwards, chapter 14, because these were 2 very different episodes that don't necessarily have a real major linear connection. So what's good about that is that we don't have the typical concern of confusing what happened between 2 installments, which can happen sometimes. So,
yeah, not a problem this time.
Yeah, and what's kind of nice is we're first going to be talking about chapter 13, and that's at least as far as Legion gets, typically, that's a bit more of a plot-driven episode, whereas chapter 14, chapter 14, is probably going to be a little low on the recapping and just talking about the different Davids, shall we say. But again, we're supposed to be talking about chapter 13 now, which could easily be subtitled the episode "How Lenny Came Back." And so there will be certain amount of recapping here, because anyone listening, now it's been a couple weeks since you watched the episode, so maybe you need your memories refreshed as well. So I'll help you out as much as I can here, within reason. One of the funniest things about the episode is the way it starts off. It starts off with a very atypical, it's like your previously on Legion type of intro, which is something they don't normally do, as far as I can recall, for Legion. But it was nice for them to remind us of what's happened so far to get our bearings. And probably could have used something like that for the beginning of chapter 14 too, quite frankly. But that opening voiceover, which I'm pretty sure it was John Hamm yet again. They're just going to keep using him for everything now. He says, apparently on Legion.
Huh, yeah, that was awesome.
And I love that. But it's also, as we've talked about many times before, it's a reminder that we can't necessarily trust anything and everything that we see on this show. You know, much like last season, when so much of what we saw was told from David's rather, I don't know, unhinged and skewed point of view, oftentimes within his own memories. I feel like the show is always playing on the idea of an unreliable narrator. You can never be too sure what's real, what's true, and then so on. Now, with this episode, another nice thing for us to be talking about it, even though it's more plot driven, it really is just watching two story threads unspool. And it really isn't until much later in the episode that one realizes that one is past and one is present. And speaking of questions of past and present, we should probably going to start first with talking about what I would call the main thread, which was the thread of Lenny now at Division 3 and what happens there. Because it's done, very simply. It's actually broken down into essentially three conversations. One could say interrogations to a certain extent, but I'll just call them conversations. Even though the first one is with the master interrogator himself, Clark. He doesn't really have to do. He's the kind of guy who doesn't really have to do much to put Lenny on or the viewer on edge. I think the nature of that room, which seems to defy the laws of physics. I mean, it's like where up is down, literally. Although you can say that figuratively about the show more often than not, I'd say.
Yeah, the room was definitely like and deliberately a mind fuck the whoever the prisoner is, or the prisoner of the week is room because yeah, everything was just so backwards there. It was, and yeah, really nice set design too, and really thoughtful for like a way of. I suppose at some point like the CIA did something like this, and maybe that inspired them. I don't know. So fuck the CIA sometimes.
But yeah, you've got a combination of the design of the room and also the way they use the camera is equally disorienting. So it's like, wait, are they actually defying the laws of gravity here or not? I'm not even sure. Or is it just supposed to have that effect on whoever is in there? Again, if there's one can just do a podcast just basically about the visuals of Legion. Although, since a podcast is generally an audio, format, spending the entire time talking about visuals might be a little bizarre. So back to that scene, as Clark kind of tends to be in general, because we see him this way with David all the time, he doesn't really seem to believe Lenny. Certainly doesn't believe that she's really any sort of a victim. I think at a certain point he even suspects that she could still be the Shadow King. Or at the very least, maybe she's like a puppet for his bidding or something. Lenny is in what I would call recovering junkie mode. She's fidgety and she's telling tales of her horrific childhood, which really seem to hold little to no interest for Clark. And here's the thing. It's the odd case of it's very likely that practically everything Lenny is telling Clark, at least about herself or about her past, is absolutely true. But the way she goes about it, the way she speaks, it's about the performance, it's about the character. It still sounds like it's just a part of one big lie or something, I think.
Yeah.
The one important fact that's divulged by Lenny is that she tells him that Farouk has found his body in the desert. Now, as the story unfolds, to a certain extent, you kind of wonder if it kind of plays a bit like a red herring for the other storyline thread in the episode that we'll get to a little bit later. At least I feel like that it's kind of the way they deliberately planned it, just to make you think one thing might be going on when in fact it's something else. The other thing, and I know you're a big fan of him as well, I really like the contrast in the performances in the scene. I mean, Linklater's Clark he's always very understated in the way he goes about things. I think the makeup on his face is probably the loudest thing about him. And Aubrey Plaza is like the exact opposite. She's in full tilt, jittery, wide-eyed, freak out mode. But it's kind of fun because also I don't think we've seen those two together before. I don't think so. right? There's no reason. I don't think they. I don't think they ever had a scene together before. I don't see how they could have actually.
Yeah, yeah, because she got killed, by getting put into a wall before he would have met
Right,
the interrogator.
and even when it was Aubrey Plaza, but she was in Shadow King mode. I don't think they ever actually encountered each other when she was like going on her rampage or whatever. I think that was
Yeah, I don't believe so.
yeah. So it is nice to see two characters interact that we haven't seen before. I think we say that about all TV shows. It's always nice to see characters bounce off each other that we haven't seen. Next up to meet Lenny is, and it's been a couple weeks, so I remember I knew the actual pronunciation because Bill Irwin said it once, and now I've forgotten it. Is it
Yeah,
Tanami? Is it
yeah,
Tanami? Okay,
yeah.
yeah. See, my inability to pronounce things even came up over the weekend, and I said, you don't want to be asking me how to pronounce anything. It's just the writer, not a talker, apparently. Although I do a podcast, we get a little bit more insight into Tanami. He specifically that he's a person. I mean, I guess his life is built upon the view that there's no actual present. Apparently the millionths of a second it takes a brain to register and process anything that you experience means whatever you're experiencing is technically in the past. And I guess that kind of syncs up with his abilities to read a person's memories and never forget anything. So clearly, he would be a person who would not forget that Lenny's eyes were always brown. Until now. Because now her eyes are blue. So he tries his little deep dive into her memories, and then we get like freak show time because he starts seeing warped and disorienting glimpses of the stories that Lenny told Clark earlier. But then we see more, flashes that maybe don't make sense in the moment, weird, creepy things. And, especially there's that one horrific, bizarre vision of Admiral Fukuyama with his basket glowing like, some sort of Chinese lantern. And then the head inside the basket. I guess that's supposed to be like a full-grown version of that thing that wormed its way into Tanami's ear a few episodes ago, which they also show. So they haven't forgotten. Not that we thought they forgot that, but it's still playing a part here, even though I still don't ultimately know where that's going to go.
Yeah.
I think you just wonder of what he's seeing is what, if any of it, is actually real. And my thinking is a lot of what they're doing to Tanami here, it feels like it's kind of like a trap that was laid by the Shadow King, just like that creature in his ear canal. I don't know if it's some way of maybe trying to neutralize Tanami as, one of Division Three's most potent weapons, maybe? I'm not really sure. But that's my way of interpreting it, at least.
Yeah, the thing in his head, also might be like, I mean, like where his power still works, but he can't it's kind of like he has like blinders on, like the thing's keeping him from like seeing stuff like the way it actually is.
That could be it, or at least causing so-called interference when if he's ever trying to read something that the Shadow King doesn't want. Like the Shadow King wouldn't want him to be able to
Right.
go through Lenny's mind or whatever this version of Lenny is. After that, I think we do get, and this is like the one thing separate from the two storyline threads, we go back to one of those little PSA segments, and this one is about the nature of conspiracy. And it's basically John Hamm telling us is how, the human mind will sooner perceive coincidence as conspiracy. That's basically what it comes down to. What we see, we're sooner to believe conspiracy than merely coincidence, I guess. Not really much more to it as far as I was concerned. I mean, I enjoy those little segments. I mean, obviously half of it's because I just like hearing John Hamm's voice again. We either, I would say on the show this season as crazy or wacky as it can get. I mean, probably those segments to a certain extent are probably the most the show gets to being quote unquote self-indulgent, but it doesn't bother me because I'm enjoying it. It's just I've accepted it as part of the fabric of the show now for this season.
Yeah, it's an interesting device for them to use, but I like the way it works, and it gives us something to think about too, like as the why those particular scenes are in each episode, like what it means, and how like just something extra to think about, and I kind of like that. Not that we don't have plenty to think about.
Right. Well, it's interesting because on one hand, I kind of view them on the surface, at the very least, that this is kind of it's almost like a writing 101 thing. This is what the theme of this episode is supposed to be. When whether it's I can't remember what the previous ones were because it's been a few weeks, but either it be madness or this or that, whatever it is. But it's interesting when you watch them, and not just that episode but future episodes, and you start seeing how things that were discussed in those PSA segments kind of relate to the story and even hint at certain things, or they actually use the characters that it really specifically connects. So I mean, again, I'm enjoying it, so hopefully other folks are too. But after that, we do eventually get to the meeting that Lenny's been asking for the entire episode, and that's to see David. Now, just like the previous two men, David also doesn't trust Lenny. And I would say he's had a problem trusting anything about her from the get-go. Because, he's constantly, since she was in that wall, so to speak, what is or isn't real as far as, Lenny is concerned. Now, here's where I got to address something. And I'm not Mr. Pat myself on the back, and I'm assuming most, or at least the majority of viewers were on the same page as I was during this. He much like the previous people, if I'm recalling, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. It's been a few days since I watched the episode. He keeps asking whose body it is. I pretty much guessed it was going to be David's sister Amy, pretty much from the very first moment anyone even raised the question of whose body was it. What was Lenny in now? It just only because just asking whose body it is already tells me, okay, it's got to be someone we know. Okay, it's got to be Amy. She hasn't been on the show hardly at all up to this point this season, and it had to be something that would really affect David, and that it seemed like the most logical choice. So that, which might have kind of lessened the power of the revelation for me personally.
I thought they were talking about which body, like they were looking for out in the desert, like, and I thought they were talking about like it was Lenny's body that they dug up, not Farouk's.
Well, I mean,
so I didn't give David's sister any thought. I didn't even recognize her until like that scene was almost done.
oh, okay. No, I mean, and yeah, we're gonna get to the desert thing right in a minute or so. I mean, yeah, as I'm watching the episode, that other storyline, my assumption was until we actually see her, I thought that they were going for Farouk's body because they told us, Farouk's body's in the desert. Here they are in the desert. They're digging something up. There's a body. Why it would be there, I have no idea. It doesn't make sense. But I was, it seemed to be following what we were being told. But it was a misdirect. That wasn't the body that they were digging up at all. The question is, why is Lenny's body there? But that's how she went from being in the wall to being buried somewhere. I guess Farouk had something to do with that. So anyway, back to David. Like I said, the episode I think wants to build up this revelation like a shocker, but I think it's more that it's shocking for David. But my assumption is this is what's likely to make David just totally disregard what future Sid said, because he was already given the warning that he was going to be killing Farouk in a week, and doing that's what sets all this other bad stuff off. So obviously she probably was trying to say maybe you don't kill Farouk, but she probably also knew she would also know what revelation was going to happen, because I think now he would want to kill Farouk out of revenge because he basically killed his sister. Is the way I would look at it.
Yep.
All
Yeah,
right.
this kind of feels like this is a point where David, like where you can really see like David's starting to shift towards like being the bad guy if he ends up being that. And it reminded me of something too. Like I can't remember exactly what, but some kind of piece of media where like where like somebody like the bad guy, whatever, like somebody close to him dies, and that's like the only thing like stopping him from being just like a complete bastard. I can't remember what it is,
All
but
right. Well, it's great that this is a show that has its origins and its inspiration from comic books, because that's a very comic booky thing. I mean,
yeah,
motivations for either heroes or villains seem to always be tied to the death of a loved one. We except when it's a hero, it's because they're out for justice, and when they're a villain, it's because they're out for revenge, and there's someone they need to blame. You know, whoever or whatever it is. So let's get to that other storyline, which obviously does collide with this one during the David and Lenny scene. Um, so as it goes on, we realize at a certain point that's actually kind of a flashback. It's a past storyline. This happened before Lenny showed up at Division 3, obviously. And we get to watch Oliver and Farouk. They're hanging out in a desert-like landscape, and they're watching that deep-sea donut food truck that's shaped like a submarine. While they have this very kind of interesting and fun little pointed conversation about things like life and death. I kind of liked it because we got to see Oliver being Oliver, as opposed to Oliver being, just manipulated or the stand-in for Farouk or something. So I really love that character. And is it Jermaine Clement? Is that the actor's name?
yeah.
He's easily one of my favorite performers on this series. He's just every time he's on screen, I light up because he's just so much fun. But the big thing here is that he basically promises that he's going to kill Farouk, which Farouk can barely even take seriously, because he's like a god and Oliver's not. Even though Oliver does have his own abilities, which I kind of forget that he has abilities himself. But he leaves a clue. He tells him, he says something cryptic to him, that 1 and 1 does not equal 2. So it's going to be interesting to figure out what that, as the remaining episodes unfold, what does that mean?
Yeah, if this is an HBO series, they just would be foreshadowing some kind of like network mandated 3-way or something. But since it's on FX, who knows?
Although they are cursing on this show.
Yes.
Actually, that's the thing on FX now for the last couple of years. They've been allowing shows to the occasional fuck here and there. I mean, it was this show, the O.J. Simpson thing, the show I watched with Tom Hardy. What was it called?
Taboo.
Taboo, right? They certainly cursed quite a few times on that one. So it's nothing new. So. So anyway, Oliver and Farouk, they pursue the donut submarine, and then that's when we eventually find out that that actually, I don't remember because I didn't write this down. I don't remember at what point. Maybe it was in between that they dig up the unknown body, or I think we see a little bit of something, and we see that device that I guess they took from Division 3. Why Division 3 has a device like that, I'm not sure. It's probably, I'm guessing it's just yet another. Did they mention in a previous episode that was like something that Bill Irwin's character, the Loudermilk, had invented or something? Because it seemed like his kind of crazy technology.
Yeah, I don't think so. Maybe that'd be something we saw last season for some reason, but I just can't remember. So
yeah, me neither. So apologies to people who want like really great razor sharp details. We're not always great for that sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, they do that, but they eventually, I guess we see it's Amy's husband, which it's a different actor now, so that's why I wouldn't have even recognized him to begin with. But apparently, it looks like Amy's been set up in some sort of almost like a witness protection program kind of a situation, except but with guards and everything. Um, why they thought she'd be safer, like in this weird middle of nowhere place, and not in Division 3. Then again, Division 3 keeps getting invaded, so maybe they're right about that. No, because that doesn't look like anyone's ever safe at Division 3. I'm guessing.
Huh.
Um, but before the really bad stuff goes down, um, Amy makes mention of these dreams that she's having that obviously involve, from the way she describes the dreams, they're obviously involving Admiral Fukuyama and his Vermilions. Or that, like, I think she was even imagining herself as one of them, like with a mustache and everything. That's very intriguing that she would have those kind of visions or dreams. So it really makes me think there's a lot more to them, and they're going to play a much bigger part over the course of the rest of the season. That they're not just simply there for weirdness sake. I mean, I knew they weren't there just to be wacky, but the fact that Amy's having dreams about them makes me think they're a much bigger deal, or maybe Fukuyama is a much more. We don't know really anything about him, but I'm getting the impression he may be a lot more powerful than we might have been led to believe, or if that makes any sense.
Yeah, they definitely don't. I don't think we're done with the characters here. So whatever they plan on doing, I'm not sure what they're going to do, but I'm sure it'll be interesting.
Right.
Interesting.
Ooh, your sound quality just improved like 1,000%. Nice. But at Amy's house, Oliver does show up. I guess I don't know if he was infused with the power of Farouk, and he's the one who did everything. But because I think he essentially wipes out everybody, including her husband, who's just dust at the door. And then he proceeds to go to town on Amy. He gets that device that he used to extract, I'm guessing, like the essence of Lenny's body or something, and basically transforms Amy's body into Lenny. So we get a lot of Amy screaming, and it's kind of, it's the whole episode has a very, and I feel like they did this in another episode of Legion. Maybe I'm thinking from last season, where they do like to touch on different genres the way they approach certain episodes. Certain episodes have a more of a sci-fi feel to them or something. This one had a more horror feel to it. It very much had a very, very horror movie kind of vibe to the whole proceedings.
Yeah, and if we were wondering if David becoming the bad guy would mean Farouk would become the good guy, I'm guessing that he probably isn't going to become a good guy anytime soon after this act. Because, yeah, I don't think we're too keen to start loving him right now.
Mm-mm. There was something really also striking about the very cold. It's a very cold, detached way that Oliver has during this whole scene, and again, it's one of those things like, is that just purely Oliver at this point, or is he in any way a vessel for Farouk, or is this just the way Oliver has become? It's very inhuman, and I think that's during that whole scene. I find that much more unnerving than Amy's screaming or whatever. Another question. Now, what he does, because basically, in order for Lenny to take over the body, so basically here they're killing Amy. But is Amy just purely dead, or does Amy become like another? What do you call it? Like another person for the soul drawer for Farouk? Are we going to see her up there with Farouk the way Oliver and Lenny were?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
See, I could see them going that way. I don't know if she's going to be in future episodes or not, but because since that was done to the other people's bodies to some extent, I don't know. I'm wondering. Guess we'll find. I mean, I'm sure we'll find out probably next week, but I guess I'm just curious. Overall, I'd say I think this whole thing worked up to a point. I definitely was suitably, intrigued, compelled, found it compelling, etc. Um, I think the weakness here is that I don't think we ever really got a strong sense of Amy really as an individual character. I mean, she definitely had some fun scenes, especially when they had like the darker version of Amy in that episode from one of the episodes from season one, whatever. But I just feel like she's really been more. She's almost been more like a plot device to like facilitate aspects of David rather than a fully fleshed out character on her own.
Yeah.
So I think that plus the fact, like I was saying, for me, it really that wasn't much of a surprise. It was her body. I kind of felt a little ambivalent about it at the end of the episode. You know
Well,
how?
yeah, it's a character we haven't seen for like 8 episodes, so we didn't really give a crap about in the first place. At least I didn't, and I tend to care about like everybody and everything around me. So
Yeah,
it was just, yeah, just
I
if it had been like if it had been like a team member or something, then maybe that'd have been a little different.
a little bit, and even that, then it would have depended on the team member. Like if it had
Yeah,
been a louder milk, we would have been upset by it because they've
yeah,
they've really done some stuff with them. You know,
yeah. Like whatever happened to that guy, the team member last season, the one that could had I don't know psychokinetic powers or something. Like whatever happened to him, we weren't too stressed out about it.
yeah, because we
Just,
hardly
just the
we never
character
we never spent
he
any
wasn't
time with
flawed.
us,
Yeah.
right? Um, yeah. So that's really all I have about chapter 13. I kind of want to talk more about chapter 14 anyway because I feel that's a bit more of
Huh.
a fascinating episode. So,
Oh, what did you think the point was? Like all those guys digging, the guys that were buying the donuts, like why they're just in a hole in the middle of the desert?
oh, you know what? I didn't give it any thought. I
Yeah.
honestly didn't give it any. I didn't know if that was just a site, some sort of weird, odd, not really a construction site, whatever the heck they were doing, and he's just the guy who's there, the food truck, for lunch for them. Although that's not much of an assignment for a food truck. It's like, oh, you'll go and like 8 guys will buy your
Huh.
stuff, and if it's donuts, it's like, how much money are you making there?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, yeah, just trying to figure out what was going on there, and or if those like miners, whatever, were like some kind of metaphor for something. I mean, like the food the donut truck was like Dead Sea something, and like the license plate on it wasn't a U.S. License plate. It was like I'm not sure if it was supposed to be Egypt or something, but it definitely had like a weird like European style
Well, it was
long
was
license plate on it.
was the actual, you talking about the submarine truck?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was deep sea donuts.
I think it was Dead Sea, but maybe it was.
No, I think it's because it's a submarines. That's why it was deep sea. I'm pretty sure it was deep sea. I say it's deep sea. We'll put up a poll later. No. All right. So let's move on to chapter 14 of Legion. Now, chapter 14, I'm going to say it's about as standalone as it ever gets for an episode of Legion. Basically, it explores multiple alternate realities, each one seeming to be a what if for David Haller. Although I think at a certain point early on, I think we do realize that one of these Davids that we're following is the actual David that we've been watching for the last year and a half, or season and a half. Well, I guess year and a half, whatever. And then obviously that's the one who ends up getting committed to Clockworks at the end. I think what makes it just a little more confusing, or at least as confusing as Legion can often be, is that we don't just get multiple versions of David. We're also getting multiple versions of those versions in the same episode. We're getting we're getting one version of a David where we see him younger, then we see him older, and I think that happens with a few different versions of David here. It's a little hard to keep track of, especially if you just watch it once, kind of without really taking any notes or anything. So let's see if we can try to remember what they all were at this point. So let's see. You had David as an old homeless guy, and let's see. Then you had David who starts out as a coffee boy at a corporation, which leads him eventually becoming an older man who's like one signature away from being the richest man in the world. Then there's the David who's a far older man who's basically an invalid being cared for by some unidentified woman. I don't know if that elderly version that no that I'm sorry, if that old man is like an elderly version of the happy suburban dad David that we see. I kind of don't think so because it doesn't seem to fit. So I think those are two separate Davids. Uh,
Yes.
what else was there? You got the scabby junkie David, who's explaining the whole alternate universe reality theory to some other guy. And okay, is the junkie David is the implication that the junkie David is a slightly later version of the sad office drone David that we see? Or do you think those are two totally different Davids?
I think they're different also.
Okay. The only reason is because there's that one moment where the sad office drone David, they show him sniffing the whiteout or something. And I was wondering if that starts to lead him down the drug path and he ends up being like the junkie or something. So, okay. What else? Oh, speaking of sad, you've got sad mustache David, um, who I guess that's the David who we see. That's one of the Davids who does interact a lot with a version of Amy, um, and works at the milk box place. It's all boxes and milk and stuff there. And then there's the David that we know. I don't know what we should call him. I mean, if this was the Flash, we'd call him Earth One David. I guess you can call him like David Prime or Dave something like that. I think that's all of them. I feel like I don't know if I'm forgetting any, and if I am, I'm sorry, but I think that's all of them, right?
Yeah, I can't think of any other one.
So I feel with this episode, this is one of those you either love it or you're not that thrilled with it kind of episodes.
Yeah,
Or I wouldn't say hate it. I don't think it's an episode that people would hate, much like the other ones I'm going to cite off the top of my head. But sometimes shows that take a chance, and we know of shows that do that, be it in narrative style or however. Sometimes the more cynical person can be. Not sure what the point of that was, or if we really needed to have that episode. You know, we
yeah.
often we often go on.
I was going to say, or this is an insult to my religion, but go on.
No, okay. Um, because I'm thinking of it could be something like we've referenced a million times before, like like the Fly episode of Breaking Bad is like that. Someone in one of the Facebook pages, Jonathan, who may or may not, I think he actually might be a listener, I'm not sure. Um, he brought up episode 8 of Twin Peaks. I'm not putting this in that category.
No.
Not that this, not. I mean, I haven't even given my opinion on the episode yet. Only because that was just so different than anything I'd ever seen before. Period. It just, it's just that's more of a mind altering hour of television than I can imagine. And
Yeah, I wouldn't. I wouldn't compare that this to that. I mean, not that this wasn't a really good quality, but I think it's apples to oranges. But if I had to like pigeonhole what this episode was exactly, I guess it kind of goes into like the transformation of David from like quote unquote good guy, which he hasn't been much of, to maybe being the bad guy. I think I kind of treat this as like this basically was like a classic like sci-fi show like series finale, where you see like a whole bunch of past versions or potential outcomes, whatever. And I
mhm.
mean, with very minor tweaking, this episode could have been like that kind of series finale. So I just kind of figure like this is maybe like they're doing that kind of episode, and it just kind of transitions to like maybe a new kind of show where David is the out of control heavy at least for a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, it certainly shows that with a lot of these versions of David, that a lot of them don't really have very happy outcomes. And they show, whether intentionally or not, that, you know, David's David's lives tend to lead to tragic ends. Whether it be however you want to define that, they're still trying. I mean, the only positive one here is that happy suburban dad, David. And notice we don't really get that much of him. We don't focus that as much on that as we do the other ones. Um, so the easiest way to talk about it is just talking about the quote unquote the different Davids. So let's knock off the old homeless guy first. Um, and of course they went someplace here. Um, People have been referencing, talking about how the show has had nods or references to Kubrick a million times over the course of the last season and a half. So they decide to just out and out, let's just recreate an actual scene from a Kubrick movie. One of the Kubrick movies people often comment on Legion kind of referencing, which is A Clockwork Orange. I mean, the fact that they did the entire thing with the droogs, approaching the homeless guy, and in fact his lines of dialogue or what he says, a lot of it, if not all of it, maybe all of it, I'm not sure, is what the old guy says in A Clockwork Orange. So they're really just replaying the scene from A Clockwork Orange, only with a very different outcome. So I couldn't decide if I should find that funny or ballsy, or should I just be going, really? Did you really need to even do that here? Because it doesn't really serve any purpose other than being cute, as far as I can see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um. So that's the one where, and obviously, because let's see, we see him as a homeless guy. We see him being approached by the thing that happens with the Droogs. Then we see him on a park bench, and that's when we see like all the military forces approaching him. So everyone knows who or what he is at this point. And I guess it's, and then eventually leads to Carrie Loudermilk basically slicing him right down the middle in half. So
Yeah.
which I didn't expect.
What?
And that's something I didn't expect to happen.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if that's like, an actual like outcome for this show, and like, that's why that's why she was the only one you saw in the scene, even though that drone was probably something that Bill Irwin's Carrie developed. So it'd be interesting to it's just, I like to think about that, just like, maybe that's what they're foreshadowing, that that she's gonna end up having to kill David, or at least try to, and then she'll be the one, like, in body form.
Possibly. I mean, I always tend to think that when it comes down to whatever the actual finale will be, if somehow the show decides to go that route and end David, I would think it would be at the hands of someone more central to the show. But who knows? I'm often wrong about things like that. Well, not often, but sometimes. Well, occasionally. Yeah, I'm not usually wrong. Anyway. So as far as Old Man storyline, or Old Man David, I thought it was okay. It was nice seeing Carrie Loudermilk in there. I wasn't really super into that storyline other than that, and I don't mind all the old age makeup that they had to do for all the different versions of David. I didn't find it that distracting. I found it appropriately bizarre looking all the time, regardless of which version of David it was. So that didn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
Let's switch over to one of the more interesting Davids, the one who started out as the coffee boy and eventually is the the basically one of the most possibly the most powerful person in the world. And I think that I mean that's the one where we really see, wow, this is if David does go to the dark side, kind of David. That one I found really fascinating. I thought that's the one I thought there was a lot there, and they really gave us a lot of interesting moments there. Did you get a kick out of that one? Was there anything that really stuck out about it for you with that one?
No, no, not really. There wasn't quite as much in there, but I did think it was interesting and well done. Again,
I think there's little moments, there's little bits of conversation or dialogue that I think have might have future meaning for the character there. I did love the idea of them keeping the woman who was the boss around as his assistant because he likes the fact that she resents him because and even though he can always read her mind, or whatever. Um, that little bit of bloody nose torture that he does to his own sister is also very interesting.
yeah,
Um, Especially when if we think back to season one and the whole situation with him being committed and everything, which they do get into in this as well. You know, one can blame a lot of what happens to him on his sister, as far as as we see in this episode. Someone made a promise that they didn't keep. You know, as far as the whole few weeks thing. Um, there's also a moment during the older rich David version that we see him briefly with Farouk, and I'm really was trying to figure out what that meant and what was the meaning of that interaction, because the two of them are like sitting across from one another, and there's all these women dancing around in the background. I was just trying to figure out what was going on with that, because it's very quick and they don't really spend much time with it. It's almost just like a thing just to go wait what kind of. So I don't know if they're basically, I don't know if they're friends, if they're adversaries, if they're just contemporaries of one another. I don't know what that was about, but I felt it meant something. And I know this is that's one of those things you can say about Legion all the live long. Like, I feel that means something, but I'm not sure what it means. But that's one of the things I think if I do choose to rewatch it, and I might try to pay a bit more attention to see if there's something I should be gleaning from that I'm just not getting right now. Or maybe I'll go back. I'll go online. I'll read a bunch of articles about it because I haven't gotten a chance to. So on this one,
yeah, it could be like like this version of David, like Farouk is in the driver's seat too, and like was never removed from him.
yeah, I don't know. He
Because he could imagine Farouk more so than David, like caring about wealth and luxury and stuff like that. So,
right.
even though he doesn't seem to be too into it,
See, I want.
David.
See, I wonder. I see. I kind of. It's interesting because I kind of felt that this is a version of David that didn't have the Farouk influence, but it should, for some reason, I thought it was the other way around. Either one. I mean, one can make. I mean, yours makes probably more sense than mine does, but I don't know. Of course, this being just some alternate wacky thing, this may never ever come up in any way, shape, or form for the rest of the series, but it's something to wonder about. So let's the we gotta mention the office drone, the office drone, David. Because one of the fascinating things about this episode is we've never really gotten a really solid, specific list or whatever you want to call it of just what it is that David is capable of doing. I mean, we know he can read minds and he can move things and stuff like that, and more. And we keep being told how powerful he is, but I've never really been clear on just what it is he can or can't do. It seems like his abilities maybe they're endless. I don't really even know. So we did get kind of a showcase in this episode of some of the different things he can do. Um, I did not ever expect to see that David would basically be able to control a mouse to lip sync to a Brian Ferry song. So that was that was one of the more interesting, unique moments on Legion. I would say the singing mouse. I almost decided to use that in our introduction for the podcast, but then I changed my mind. Um, if the office drone is just that, we just see him there and we don't see anything else with him, and he's at the other one, then we'll just move on to, I think. I mean, Scabby Junkie seems like he's just there just to explain to those who don't who aren't into alternate reality stuff, the theory with French fries and how they branch out and how they change it. Which, I mean, it feels like I've had those scenes before in other sci-fi shows where someone has to explain it. But I like that they have just this irrational junkie doing it, so it's a little bit different, but it and they also kind of pepper these things and all these characters, these versions of David. There seems to be little elements in their stories that link to the real David, or link to memories of the real David, or the David we know. Like even that shopping cart. We remember that shopping cart from past memories of David with Lenny and stuff like that, for example. So, but probably other than real David, the saddest one and probably and also the most memorable one, I would say, is Mustache David, or sad. I call him Sad Mustache David, because he's got a sad mustache. He's that whole scene that happens out on the street with the police. Yeah.
Huh.
That when he makes that one cop kind of essentially just fold in on himself and implode, that was, I mean, I went back and replayed that a couple times. I mean, that's one of the that's definitely that one. That's definitely, that might be one of the freakiest deaths I've seen on this show, and if not just freakiest moments, period. Yeah, that was something I would not have wanted to watch like at 4 in the morning and then go to sleep right after. So I think that image would be in my head playing, over and over as I try to sleep. So that David dies because he gets shot. Because we see her later at his grave, after he basically wipes out the entire police force essentially. So obviously a tragic end there, and then we have like real David, who we basically see, and we see the whole story peppered throughout, little flashes of things that we'd seen from season 1, like him as a kid and him not wanting to take his pills and all that stuff. But it just gets really sad when she basically brings him to Clockworks, and and she promises that he'll only be there for a few weeks, and we know full well that's not true. Which then makes me go, there. That's what happens. Now you're dead. But and that was pretty. And then they kind of did a little quickie fast forward just to see how that leads to where we are now in the story of Legion. Get all those flashes of things that happened in season 1 and a little bit of season 2. I like how what the time they spent on season 2 was just like, ding ding, here we are. They didn't really. Almost makes you think, really? Did not that much happen? I when I first watched, right after I watched it, I was in like wow mode. I've cooled down a little bit on the episode, but I still really like it. What were your feelings on it overall?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I think it holds up, and I don't think it was unnecessary. Exactly. I thought it was just really interesting. Plenty of stuff for us to think about. Maybe some foreshadowing for various things that might happen in the future, as well as like a little bit look into the past too.
Yeah, I do suspect that they've peppered the episode with little things that may be like foreshadowing of things of with David. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, they gave. I mean, that's an actor's dream. That episode. I mean, Dan Stevens got to do everything in that episode. It was,
Yeah.
um, yeah. I've said it before, so I repeat myself again. He's come a long way since Downton Abbey.
Huh. Yeah.
Because this, wow. I mean, again, look, he's not going to get nominated. Not in our lifetime. But if he was submitting an episode for the Emmys, to qualify, right now, this is the one I'd be submitting.
Well, he played a well liked character on a very popular show, and then wanted to leave the show so he could do some other stuff and presumably not get typecast. Well, I think he was very successful in doing that. So it's always good to see when somebody just makes the hard decision and decides to go do something, a variety of other things different, because he does other things too besides Legion.
Yeah. I know he's been in a few movies that he's done. He's been. I think he's like a not a serial killer, but he's some sort of like contract killer in some movie, which I've heard is actually pretty good, but I can't recall what the movie is right off the top of my head now.
Yeah. So it's nice to see somebody like he isn't just a good actor who isn't skating by on his looks. He wants to do interesting things, and I respect him for that.
Yeah. And yeah, this I do want. I definitely will watch this one again. So I'm pretty sure when we do our next Legion podcast, I gotta have more thoughts about it, because I'm already, like, right now I'm thinking of things I didn't even mention. Like, hey, they even mentioned the moment where he sees Sid like in the back of a car. So I love the whole, because then you get it being like the alternate universe idea, and in this universe, Sid is this or this. I'm trying to think. Is there anyone else that we see? I don't think we see. Do we see any other members of Division 3 or any of those people? I don't think so. It's just we got Carrie in the old man one. We got Sid there. I think that's it. I don't think we see anyone else. I don't think we see.
No.
No. Okay. Yeah. So I'm still enjoying this season. I haven't really made up my mind how I'm feeling about this season compared to the first one. Because I love the first one so much. I think I need to see how the rest of this plays out to really make up my mind about it. I think so, because I really love season 1. Didn't I make that my number 1 show? I think I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So clearly. Maybe this one might be a step or two behind it, I'm thinking. I'll see. Also, I'm loving, again, I'm loving the musical choices on the show too for both these episodes. Whether it be the actual music, using actual tracks, or those covers that Noah Hawley has been doing. I think this one ends with him doing a cover of R.E.M's "I Am Superman," which is really nice. And I think maybe in the previous episode, he actually does a cover of Tom Petty's "Don't Come Around Here No More," if I'm remembering correctly. And I'm really, really getting a kick out of this stuff. It's like I kind of want to I almost want to have them all on one album or something, if people still bought albums or something. I think this is the first episode of the season that was totally just written by Noah Hawley, by the way. That one, if I'm not mistaken. So that's something. All right. Is there anything else you want to say about the show before we tie things up here?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? All right.
Yeah.
I gave you a chance, man. It's not my fault. Not my fault. All right. Hey, you know what we just did? We just covered 2 episodes in just over an hour. All right. If you enjoyed this podcast, then you would enjoy hanging out on our Facebook page as well. It's the Serious TV Drama Podcast page. Type that in, like the page, join the conversation about shows like Legion and so many others. You can also find us on the iTunes the very same way. You type in Serious TV Drama Podcast. Do not type in Serious Drama TV Podcast, although you might find us that way anyway. But when I was mentioned on the broadcast, they introduced me as part of the Serious Drama TV podcast, and I didn't feel like correcting because no one cares. Anyway, but you can find us on iTunes. Subscribe to our feed as well as rate and review us there if you like. Heck, you can Google Serious TV Drama Podcast and probably find us in 10 other places as well. I do that sometimes. I'm kind of amazed by it. And finally, you can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast. It's at STVD as a Serious TV Drama Podcast. That's it for this week. We're both a little... I think even though it's several days later, I think we're both still recovering just a little bit from Raleigh, so we may be a little bit more tired than normal. Plus, I don't think... We didn't start recording until shortly before midnight, and I think we didn't realize we were going to record until 5 minutes before that, so... It is what it is, but we felt we owed you guys a podcast, so hopefully you will take that into consideration.
Yep.
All right. So with that, good night, Dan, and good night to everyone else out there.
Good night, Scott. Good night, everybody else out there.